Hey everyone. So growing up in the 90s, I was a huge fan of the Nintendo 64. And also part of that 90s nostalgia was professional wrestling. So recently, I went back and replayed every single wrestling game made for the Nintendo 64, and I'm going to talk about them here along with what key wrestling events were going on during the year of that game's release. At the end, I'll kind of do a mock ranking so you'll at least have a sense of which ones to buy, which ones to avoid. And if that sounds interesting to you, let's go ahead and check it out. So North America had 10 different wrestling games released throughout the life cycle of the Nintendo 64. And they span WCW, WWF, and there's one ECW game as well. So the first game came out in 1997. Now, during that time in 1997, there was a lot of things happening in the professional wrestling world. Specifically, the New World Order had officially been in existence for about a year and a half. You had the Montreal Screwjob, where Bret Hart was leaving World Wrestling Federation, going over to World Championship Wrestling, and Vince McMahon and crew were paranoid, terrified that he was going to take the championship belt with them and go off to the competing company with their title. So they arranged a nefarious sort of ending where Shawn Michaels effectively steals the belt from Bret Hart with a botched finish, and a lot of controversy ensued from that as well. The most important thing to note though about 1997 is that WCW was largely in control of the Monday Night Wars. I mean, WWF at this time just hadn't found a way to respond yet. A lot of their key talents were jumping ship, leaving WWF, going to WCW. This was exhibited, years prior with the departure of names like Hollywood Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash. Of course, they went on to form the New World Order. But then you had other names that were jumping as well. And, Bret Hart was one of the biggest names to jump at this point in time in 97. And there's just no real way for WWF to stop the bleeding. So at this point in time, again, WCW being the more dominant property, or the more dominant wrestling gig out there, I should say, it makes sense that the WCW games are going to be a little bit better at this point in time. So specifically, in December of 1997, we were given WCW vs. NWO World Tour. Now this game was developed by Asmik Ace Entertainment and AKI Corporation. It was published by THQ. Now admittedly, when this game came out, it was pretty rudimentary compared to how the games have evolved throughout the life cycle of the Nintendo 64. However, I thought it was amazing. I thought it was awesome. So up until this point in time, the only good wrestling games I actually played were either in arcade settings like WWF Raw, or I think they had one that was like Royal Rumble. The ones that were very limited, maybe 6 characters you could choose from, just throwing people out of the ring. And they ported a few of those over to like Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. But you really didn't have a good quality wrestling game in my opinion. They were all more so like arcade type of wrestling games. This game remedied that, at least in my opinion. So when it came out, looking back at it now, I mean the graphics are kind of horrible. It's got a lot to be desired, but at the time, it was a very nice blueprint for the potential of what could be done. So what I mean by this is, you start to see different character designs and outfits, which I'm not really too certain we saw too much of up to this point. The ability to change the clothing and outfits on characters. That sounds kind of stupid to say, like, oh, why are you getting excited about that? But it's the whole NWO thing that changed it. Like being able to take any chump character out there and put them in a New World Order shirt, or change the face paint on like Sting and what have you, make him like black and blue versus black and white. It was awesome. It did have some limitations though. I mean, there's no character walkouts. The characters just kind of appear, and it's very generic, non-ceremonious how they appear. The music that they come out to, it's generic to a T. I mean, it's not even a rip-off of the character walkout music. It's just someone with a garage band out there, and they strummed together some things in the studio, threw it up there. Now, this game was pretty cool though in that it allowed you to use weapons, which again, I don't think this was a thing that you could do up until this point in time. So being able to actually pull a weapon out of the stands and use it against your opponent outstanding feeling. The game also had 2 hidden characters. I mean, there were more than 2, but I remember Diamond Dallas Page was one of the big ones, and then Macho Man Randy Savage. There were a few others that you could unlock, but I remember you had to go through like a whole championship belt mode to unlock them. I remember spending hours upon hours just going through. I had a cheap little system where I would throw someone out of the ring and then win by ring out, count out, and then run back into the ring and just keep doing that to quickly progress through and unlock everything. Totally cheap, I know, but at the time, you know, when you're trying to unlock these characters, that's what you had to do. The other thing is the controller, the N64 controller. I know it gets a lot of flack for being wonky, but honestly at the time, the controller worked pretty well. I remember using like the down C to run, up C or one of those with like taunt. I remember there were the grapple moves, the power moves. I thought it worked out great. You had the D-pad that you could do to actually move. You could make your special work by wiggling the analog stick. Once you had the special, it activated. So overall, I thought this was a very good entry wrestling game for the Nintendo 64. And you'll see this partnership between AKI and THQ come up a few more times during this list. So it's 1998. In April of 1998, Monday Night Raw finally breaks the losing streak it had. It takes one from WCW Monday Nitro. It finally wins one of the rating wars. They follow up with D-Generation X invading WCW headquarters in the tank, which they made a whole spectacle about that on TV. You also have the rise of Bill Goldberg this year. So Goldberg was this undefeated machine. He was like 170-something and 0 when he finally gets a championship shot against Hollywood Hulk Hogan. He defeats Hogan Monday night on Raw in Atlanta to capture the title, which was a huge event for WCW. So yeah, it was really cool to see all that happen in this year. WCW was dominating much of the year. WWF started to see a cash-in of a lot of the characters they were investing time in. So Stone Cold Steve Austin was getting hot. D-Generation X was getting hot. The Rock was a rising star. You started to see a lot of the talent that was homegrown to WWF really start to shine. And at this point, it was starting to match and outpace the WCW formula, which was starting to get stale. I mean, yeah, they had NWO, they split off into NWO Wolfpack, which kind of breathed a little bit of life into it. But even that was getting old, right? And they made Bill Goldberg, who basically a nobody, former NFL football player that they just made undefeated. The guy, by all respects, didn't really have any technical wrestling chops. They just made him, booked him like a monster, made him into a monster, and they made a star out of him. It worked well for them, but it wasn't a true investment in talent like what WWF was putting in. And you really saw in 1998 that investment in talent start to matriculate for the WWF. So in terms of games, this is the year you get WWF War Zone. So this is August 11th, 1998. It was published by Acclaim, developed by Iguana West. This game was interesting in that the graphics did look a lot better than WCW vs. NWO World Tour. There are also some pretty cool things they did in terms of having character walkout music. It sounded like the character's walkout music. Like I used to put this on, and you know, Stone Cold's dun 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 sounded just like Stone Cold's music. So that was pretty cool too. It was awesome too in that the characters would actually walk down to the ring, which in terms of wrestling games, a lot of it comes down to just creating that environment. And that's why a lot of people enjoy wrestling, in my opinion. It's getting lost in these environments, these storylines, these larger-than-life sort of characters and personalities. You really kind of mute all that, like with the WCW vs. NWO game, where characters just kind of like up here in the ring. You capture it by having them walk out to the ring with their music playing, which this game introduced. So kudos to this game for that. It also brought color commentary on, so it's pretty cool to be actually wrestling and hear commentators talk about, oh, he's opened a can of whoop on this guy, and you know, that's a slobber knocker tonight. You know, Jim Ross going at it. There also were more match types that were introduced. So WCW vs. NWO World Tour, very basic, like, you know, nothing really special built into that. You know, single match, tag match, handicap match. Don't really think they had a cage match. This game introduced more of those types of match types, which really helped show more of the creativity again of where these games could go. Now, honestly, the big negative against WWF War Zone, it is the most important, unfortunately. the control schemes. This just wasn't a fun game to play. It was janky, it was hard to maneuver your character. Even if you spent time to kind of get good with it, it still sucked. And I spent time with it, trust me, I did. I preferred playing WCW vs. NWO World Tour to this game, even though, just comparing the two side by side, WCW vs. NWO World Tour, the graphics are inferior, the style of it is inferior, like the energy and attitude captured is inferior. It was a better playing game. It was a more fun game to play. Now I'll say this though, THQ and AKI, they got it right this time with the release of WCW vs. NWO Revenge. This is August 26, 1998. So this game, you want to talk about capturing that energy, that attitude of professional wrestling? They got it right here. So now you start to see more interesting characters. You're starting to see more of the walkout music, more of the attitude and edge coming out. You've got like Raven's Flock and all these other like people that were missing from WCW vs. NWO World Tour. You also have the NWO Black and White. You got the NWO Wolfpack. You got Goldberg. You got all that going on with it. You've got the updated match types, so it's no longer the generic, bland, boring WCW vs. NWO World Tour limited match types. You've got like WWF War Zone level match options, so cage matches and battle royale and stuff like that. They introduced a referee, which I thought was pretty interesting. At the time, it was kind of funny to see a ref like, remind me of that guy, the Toasty guy from Mortal Kombat 2. But it helped. It helped add more of the realism to the game. Along with that, the crowd starts to interact more in this game, and you start to see signs that the crowd is holding in the stands. So, again, really capturing more of that realistic wrestling environment. You could really tell at this point in time, this is like WCW was in their prime. Now, the one thing that I think is really weird about this game, though, the developers, for whatever reason, once you cycle through all the characters, towards the back selection, all these like random characters from like Dead or Alive Wrestling or like these other generic stables they made up. I don't know if they're trying to give love to like indie performers in Japan or something, but they're very weird. I don't know of anyone that actually ever played with them or chose them. I would use them as jobbers in matches, or sometimes I copy the character over and then modify them and change a bunch of stuff about them. I never actually played as the character. So it's just interesting. I'm curious if anyone actually did play with these. Like, what's their purpose? Because to me, they're just throwaway garbage that you could have actually tried to get licensing for real people and had better character options, but hey, what do I know? Now, in 1999, however, this is where it all really starts to go downhill for WCW. So specifically, in early January 1999, we have the infamous Finger Poke of Doom. So this is when you had Hollywood Hulk Hogan, who was representing the Black and White NWO, beefing with Kevin Nash, the leader of NWO Wolfpack, the Red and Black. Nash was the World Heavyweight Champion. They were having this match where it was a championship match, but at the end, the leader, the winner of the match became the leader of the unified NWO. The bell rings, the match starts, both men kind of square off, look at each other, do a stare down, and then here it comes. Hogan pokes Nash, Nash falls to the ground, he gets pinned. They both celebrate as Hogan's the new champion, and the fans are left feeling ripped off, like WTF just happened. It was a really sad day being a fan because the product was just completely thrown out the drain. And the fact that the writers thought that they could just like play with fans' emotions and disregard everything they thought about storylines and build up and payoffs, it was just crap. I'll say though, that same night on Monday Night Raw, you actually had Mankind, who's one of the incarnations or personas of Mick Foley, win his first WWF World Championship match against The Rock in a no holds barred, anything goes, Extreme Rules sort of match. And I remember this had a little bit of controversy in it, in that WCW tried to punk WWF by giving away the outcome of it, because for whatever reason, I forget what happened, but this WWF match, either it occurred in London or there was something going on that actual Monday that they had to record like a few days in advance. So it's pre-recorded, but still appeared on Monday Night Raw as a live event, even though it wasn't live. But lo and behold, people knew the outcome. WCW trolls, they tried to spoil it by saying, oh, don't even bother watching this programming, because if you turn over there, you're going to see Mankind win the WWF Championship for the first time. You're better off staying here where you don't know what's going to happen. What did people do? They flipped the channel and watched WWF. The other big thing that happened, May 1999, you had Owen Hart. He tragically died in the ring, fell from the rafters during an intro. That was a big tragedy in the wrestling world. And then later that summer, you had the arrival of Chris Jericho to Monday Night Raw, where he interrupted The Rock. One of the best opening debuts on wrestling ever, in my opinion. Really a monumental moment for him, because at the time, he was always a mid-carder at best in WCW. They just never really took him as a talent or several other talents and utilized them properly. You'll see this again later with the arrival of people like Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn when they jumped over. Even people like Booker T, who I know Booker T technically became a world champion towards the tail end of WCW, but WWF really helped elevate his career even more, where he was so poorly managed with WCW for so long. Anyways, back to the games. So 1999, WCW is in the flusher. It is spinning, spiraling. The games are going to start reflecting that. Specifically, February 1999, we have WCW Nitro by Inland Productions and published by THQ. This game, full disclaimer, hot pile of garbage. This is one of the worst, if not the worst, games on this list. So, for starters, there's an extremely limited selection of characters. I mean, I was hoping for like a full roster of people to play with. It's like maybe like 16 or 20. I didn't actually do a count, so I'm just making up numbers. But a significantly limited number of characters from what I was expecting or used to with the other wrestling games. There was no ability to customize the characters, which that matters if you're trying to make like NWO characters versus not, which was a thing back then. There was no walkouts, no entrances, no anything. It was very boring. The gameplay options were severely limited with a small number of generic matches to choose from. Trolls were not responsive. The game was janky as all get out. The biggest gripe I have with this game is the camera. Every time you're playing, the camera's like moving around following you as you're trying to play, and you can never really see what's going on. It is annoying. It is so horrible. It makes me dizzy. You can't ever get a sense of where you are. Absolutely horrible. Complete garbage. The announcers make annoying one-liners, like out of nowhere. Like, I don't even have an example. It was that stupid, right? I'm sure one will play here in the footage that you'll be able to hear, but it was so horrible. And the other thing that was completely garbage was, I'd start a match. I set one up just for giggles as Scott Hall versus Kevin Nash, so two long-standing members of the New World Order. 2 seconds into the match, Chris Jericho comes in and interferes against me to help out Kevin Nash. Why would Chris Jericho ever interfere in an NWO match? He was never involved in the NWO storylines, never a member of NWO, never interfered with either side, never really gave a crap. He was mid-card. He was always kind of pushed off with the B-team talent in WCW. If anything, there's probably clips out there of him getting beat up by the NWO, not really helping interfere with their storyline. So, really weird. I mean, I know interferences happen in these wrestling games, but not 2 seconds in. Never 2 seconds in. And especially not some unrelated, correlation of characters like Chris Jericho getting involved in NWO beef. Wouldn't happen. So later in the summer of 1999, we have WWF Attitude, which this is published by Activision. It was developed by Acclaim Studios, Salt Lake City. Now, this game felt a lot like WWF War Zone, but it still had somewhat limited match options. So the game has the character walkouts and the intro music, but it lacked the giant Jumbotron in the background, the Titantron they were calling it at the time. That was a huge part of wrestling too, is seeing someone's name or seeing their video pop up on the back of the screen. This game didn't have that. The game does still feel extremely clunky. It's stiff and rigid. It's not fun to play. But it did get a few things right. It did introduce a few things that other games could take and run with and maybe improve upon. Specifically, the commentary is way better in this game. Like, the commentary is actually matching the flow of the match. It's pertinent to what's going on in the ring. It feels more natural. There are audience chants in the crowd, and they get into it with the match. They really help to build that energy level, that excitement. It makes you feel more immersed in the action, and I appreciated that as well. The game also introduced a career mode where you could start as a character and go after a different championship belt, which I believe we hadn't really seen prior to this in any of these games. I mean, I know we had like a championship mode, chase a belt, but not really like a career mode, which I liked about this. And it also had the ability to create your own pay-per-view, which I thought was awesome too. It's a concept that comes up in later games that I fully utilized as a kid playing this, and loved custom creating pay-per-views with titles on the line and following stuff that way. So even though this game was kind of janky and not really all that fun to play, it did have some interesting concepts to it that I appreciated. Okay, so in September 1999, we have another WCW game. This is WCW Mayhem. So it's by Kodiak Interactive, published by Electronic Arts. This is another really crap game that I don't recommend playing at all. So it's very mundane, very boring. The overall atmosphere is lacking. I mean, the game, it just feels kind of stale and generic, much how WCW was starting to feel at the time. Like it's overstayed its welcome. You're starting to feel a playoff on these games. There are no crowd reactions whatsoever. I mean, I'm wrestling this guy, and it's like two dudes wrestling alone in a big arena with no one in it. It's really weird and off-putting. The graphics are probably the worst I've seen in a wrestling game. It's a huge regression here. It's like someone got a check to develop this thing. They got paid, and they're like, well, doesn't really matter what we put out at this point, you know, just get it out the door and call it a day. It looks and feels in this game. This is definitely top 3 worst, if not, you know, the worst. I'll let you make your own decision on that. There's another one coming that I think actually is worse than this one and the one I mentioned previously, so we'll see. So rounding off the year 1999. You remember how I talked about WCW vs NWO World Tour and WCW NWO Revenge, which was, you know, developed by AKI Corporation, put out by THQ? Well, those are 2 WCW-based games. They started to wonder, oh, you know, WWF's getting hot right now. What can we do if we flip the script and start making WWF games instead of WCW games? So they put out WWF Wrestlemania 2000. Now, honestly, this is probably my favorite wrestling game on the Nintendo 64. This is the one that I sunk so much time into, so many hours into. This one feels like it just finally got everything right. It's got great gameplay mechanics, which that's first and foremost for these games. They have to be fun to play. They have to have responsive controls. They have to flow and feel natural. This checks off all of those. Next, you've got, you know, everything I've been complaining about, you know, it's fixed here. You've got intros. You've got walkout music. You've got the Jumbotron, the Titantron. You've got like managers that will come out with you. I remember you got like the Godfather and Hose coming out, or you got like, you know, random stuff like that that's happening, which is wild. I hadn't seen that before in a game. You got the crowd really getting into it. You got the career mode. I remember too, I think Shawn Michaels was the big unlockable character here by going through the career progression and getting the World Championship belt. I remember I got this game on Christmas morning, and by Christmas evening I'd unlocked Shawn Michaels because I just dumped so much time into it and was so committed to making this happen. And then, you know, you've got the whole character customization thing too. So you got Shawn Michaels, who was in his like Heartbreak era, but then you could also go ahead and flip the switch and make Shawn Michaels D-Generation X era too, which was really cool. I mean, they got Stone Cold, they've got The Rock, they've got Mankind, Undertaker, you've got the cage matches, you've got Royal Rumble, which is actually a really fun way to play Royal Rumble. And I still play Royal Rumble in this game to this day. You had the ability to create your own pay-per-view. Now remember I talked about the end of the rosters on the other THQ games? You got those like janky characters like the Dead or Alive Alliance, or, you know, AKI team or whatever. I think you saw those there. I can't remember in this game, but what I did anyway was I just erased over those slots, custom created my own wrestling gig, made my own belts for my own stables and all that, made my own pay-per-views that were branded whatever I created. And I loved the creativity that you could put into this. So I would make these characters and I would mix like The Rock's music with the Godfather's Titantron video, but have him use like the Stone Cold Stunner as a finisher and this and that and all this crazy crap you would do. And the funnest part was when you go play with your friends and you got a group of buddies and it's like, oh, who's this custom character using? And they come out and because of the entrance or whatever, people are just dying laughing. I mean, that was such a rewarding experience when you had that and like that camaraderie with buddies. You could like make yourself as a wrestler. I love that. I put so much time into this game. I can't say enough good things about this game. I know one of the next games coming up on this list, some people are going to agree to disagree and say that's the better game. Maybe it is. This game is still my favorite for all these reasons. I can't recommend WWF Wrestlemania 2000 enough to you. So let's get segue into the year 2000. So that's the final year that we're going to see wrestling games released for Nintendo 64. And there's a few things happening during this year in the world of wrestling. So in early 2000, you start to see some WCW talents defect over to Monday Night Raw. So specifically, you got the segment where there's Chris Benoit, Perry Saturn, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko sitting in the stands. You know, later we learn that they're under contract, but at the time there's that whole vibe and feel of what are these WCW talents doing? Sitting in and viewing a WWF live event. You also started to have Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo just running WCW into the ground. Just horrible decisions, uninteresting product, not really watchable. At this point in time, 2000, I wasn't watching any WCW at all. If I watched wrestling, I was watching WWF. They were just a hot hand. It was the height of the Attitude Era. Every week, it was just what wild and crazy stuff are they going to pull out here now? They never really put their foot off. They never really took their foot off the gas, despite starting to beat WCW in the Monday Night Wars. And I appreciate that about the WWF product. So of note here, you have your first and only ECW Extreme Championship Wrestling entry into the Nintendo 64 library. So there's ECW Hardcore Revolution. It's developed by the Acclaim Studios, Salt Lake City, published by Acclaim. So this game, you know, at the time, ECW was a hot alternative if you're tired of the junk that was being put out by WCW and you didn't really feel like watching WWF. ECW was what you would flock to. I remember at the time it was a Pennsylvania, I believe, a Philadelphia-based company. And Friday nights it came on TV, and I remember this is back when you had actual cable boxes and channel 26 or something, I can't remember. Friday nights at like 8 o'clock it would come on and be on for about 2 hours. And the stuff they were putting out on TV, it was like, holy crap. It was like extreme compared to everything that was being put out by WWF or WCW, hence the name Extreme Championship Wrestling. At the same time, you had that whole backyard wrestling craze, if you recall that, where like dudes were spending their weekends like throwing each other off the roof of their houses and like pile driving each other through tables and all this stupid stuff. ECW programming, that was a regular thing. They were doing this all the time when they were on television. So I went into this game hoping for some of that, hoping to experience a small sliver of that. No. This game, compared to what ECW was at the time, this game is a colossal failure. It's a colossal misrepresentation, it's a colossal disappointment, a stain on the ECW branding. So what do I mean by that? The matches, the actual wrestling in this, it's generic. It's like high school wrestling with a little bit of like sports entertainment moves, but there's none of that extreme stuff. You couldn't grab like a Kempo stick and hit someone. You couldn't grab barbed wire and throw it on someone or powerbomb someone on thumbtacks. There's none of that. Or if there was, I didn't play long enough to unlock it. The characters, so I know ECW, I don't want to call them third tier because that's almost insulting, but they had wrestlers that weren't as mainstream as who you were seeing on WCW or WWF. Granted, different wrestlers would go to ECW to kind of rebrand themselves and then reappear at one of the bigger players and have a stellar career. Stone Cold Steve Austin did this. I know Chris Jericho did this at one point in his career. There were others. But the time playing this game, you know, there were a few standout stars who should have been on here and just been like really like awesome to play as. They didn't really stand out. I mean, the standout character on here for me was Rob Van Dam. I think there's even Rhino on here. A lot of the others that should have made an appearance just either didn't, or they were like severely neutered in how they appeared as a playable character. The other thing I'll say about this game is that when the characters like walked out to the ring, every single one of them had this gait to them. They look like they've just got off of riding a horse for like the last 3 or 4 days nonstop. You know, they got that little like Western cowboy like, oh, hey partner. It's like, what is this? This makes no sense. So I thought that was really weird. This is not a good game. I don't recommend it, and it was highly disappointing for having the ECW name on it. And then in November of 2000, we have what many people would arguably consider to be the best wrestling game. Definitely on the N64, maybe of all time. We have WWF No Mercy. So this is the same team that made WWF Wrestlemania 2000, WCW NWO Revenge, WCW vs. NWO World Tour. Honestly, they took everything that was great about those games and expanded on them. It's all the great stuff that I loved in WWF Wrestlemania 2000 and more. The and more part is they made like special bonus challenges where you get like money or dollars. You can use your dollars to unlock certain things, if you're unlocking moves or unlocking character clothing or intros or what have you. It was really cool what they did there. The career mode was a little bit more interactive in terms of having like the dialogue back and forth or cutting promos. Truly, it probably is a better game than WrestleMania 2000. I just didn't park nearly as much time here because I was so infatuated with WrestleMania 2000. I never really jumped onto here and took off with it like other people did. But that's not to take anything away from this game. It's a great game. I think a lot of people, let me know in the comments if you prefer this one to the rest of the games. I think you probably do, but let me know if you're team WWF WrestleMania 2000 or team WWF No Mercy. Curious to know. And then last but not least, rounding off this list of 10 wrestling games, this is, in my opinion, the worst game of the entire bunch. It's a WCW game. WCW was clearly in the crapper at this point in time. It didn't last much longer after the release of this game. This is WCW Backstage Assault. Now, the reason why this game is so horrible, there's no wrestling in a ring. Every single amount of wrestling in this game takes place backstage, either in a dressing room, in a locker room, in the gorilla area leading down to the ring, in the parking garage, in the whatever. It's stupid. It's really hard to like get into the vibe and feel of wrestling when you're never even starting in a ring. It'd be cool if it like spilled out into this, but no. Like your match will start in like the boiler room of a basement, and that's it. That's where it's going to stay. It feels like a huge step backwards in so many directions. I mean, the gameplay sucks. The controls are horrible. The game's not fun. Graphically, everything looks muddy. It's hard to see what's going on. It's truly like they just stopped caring. Like, whatever. You know, WCW's going down the tubes. No one's going to buy this anyway. Yeah. This game is absolutely atrocious. I mean, I could go on and on about how bad it was, but to be truthful, it was so bad I didn't even want to spend any more time here than what I did to capture the gameplay footage. If I had to recommend not buying one so strongly, it's this one. Do not buy this. Avoid at all costs. It is a complete steaming pile of horse garbage. So there you have it. That's a look at 4 years of wrestling in totality with 10 different games for the wrestling genre spanning the Nintendo 64. Be sure to let me know what you thought about this and if any of these games were your favorite or if I was a little too harsh on some of the ones I said were garbage. I thought that this was a great time to be a wrestling fan. It's a great time to be an N64 owner as well. I think the games on the Nintendo 64 for wrestling definitely were better at this point in time. Now that's going to change when we go into PlayStation and PlayStation 2 when we talk about some other games like WWF SmackDown, which outstanding games. But maybe I'll do a video on that at some point too. But anyways, curious to know your thoughts. As always, thank you so much for watching. Thanks so much for subscribing. Catch you next time. NWO for life.